Hi, and welcome to Viewmaster Travels. For this episode, it's Reel 367, dated 1955, the Sunken Gardens of St. Petersburg, Florida. We were exploring St. Petersburg, looking for any remaining old green benches, when we passed a sign for the Sunken Gardens. I knew I had a Viewmaster reel of the gardens, so we took a detour to visit, knowing nothing at all about the place. There's 7 3D pictures on the reel, and it looked like a pleasant place, but truth is, the gardens have changed a lot since the 50s, and I wasn't expecting there to be as much to discover as we did. Here's the first Viewmaster picture. Entrance to Gardens. There's no trace today of the entrance shown from 1955. Today you follow this sign and enter through this building over here. Turns out the building's a significant historic landmark, but more on that later. I immediately got the feeling that the gardens had changed a lot since the Viewmaster pictures were taken, so I was worried if anything today would look the same. The gardens have been here since 1902, but weren't really open as a proper tourist attraction until around 1930. They were run by George Turner, and when this Viewmaster picture was taken, they were entering what would be their golden years. They were one of the world's leading collections of rare and exotic plants, and visitors could wander along the fanciful paved walkways looking at the plants, waterfalls, tropical flowers, and fruit trees. The Viewmaster reel captured a few of these views, so we'll take a look at them a little later. Turner's 2 sons, Ralph and George, expanded the exhibit, spurred on by the post-war boom in travel and tourism. They added animals like flamingos and parrots, held events like the Miss Florida pageant, and purchased the Coca-Cola building next door to create the world's largest gift shop and the current garden entrance. As the 70s drew to a close, though, Ralph Turner passed the gardens on to his 3 sons, Raymond, James, and Thomas, who inherited an uphill battle against nearby Disney World. In the 80s, attendance was down severely. The 3 Turners did their best to revitalize interest in the gardens. They added bird shows and alligator wrestling, but by the mid-90s, the gardens were in serious trouble. Employees gathered 16,000 signatures on a petition to save the gardens, and the city council gave it a historic designation to help preserve it, but by 1999 the gates were padlocked as the gardens closed. Ray Turner told the Lakeland Ledger, "There's not going to be a 4th generation here, but at least he could run out there naked now if he wanted to." And in the realm of things I couldn't make up if I tried, turns out Turner did try and turn the property into a nudist resort, threatening to sell to a literal Florida man who wanted to keep it historic by going back to Adam and Eve, opening the Sunken Gardens of Eden. Luckily, the city of St. Petersburg saved the gardens and perhaps our eyes, as they did buy the property, undertaking several years of restoration before reopening it to the public. We bought our tickets and headed through the old gift shop building into the gardens looking for something like this. General view. Today the gardens seem very different to what I saw on the Viewmaster reel. The 3D pictures show a lot of flowers, but our exploration felt more like wandering through a dense jungle as the sun was setting, so I couldn't take similar pictures at all. But it was a fantastic place to explore. We strolled through tall palm trees and past lush undergrowth, plus flamingos and parrots were recently brought back to the gardens, so we got to look at those, and there's plenty of waterfalls and ponds. And the trails do lead slowly downhill, and I realized the gardens were literally sunken, so of course I had to wonder how these acres of exotic scenery came to be. The year was 1902. The city of St. Petersburg, incorporated just 15 years earlier, was just a few square blocks of dusty, unpaved roads, although it did have electricity, a public telephone system, and a great pier. It lies in the corner of the Pinellas Peninsula, and ever since the Civil War had ended, the formula for success on this remote Florida bayou had been clear. Move into the area, buy a piece of land, the state was in debt and selling it cheap, drain it dry and start a citrus orchard. Peter Demon's railroad could ship your fruit north to market, and success was inevitable. And by the turn of the century, hundreds of successful orange groves covered the landscape. This especially appealed to George Turner, who was a successful Jacksonville plumber looking for new opportunities. He had a keen interest in gardening, so the stories of how fertile the reclaimed swampland was really piqued his interest. Plus, the plumbing opportunities in the booming city of St. Pete's could really help with finances. He bought several plots of land along the dusty road that would become 4th Street, but the one that really got his attention was here, a giant, muddy, water-filled sinkhole on 6 acres. He made this one his new home. Turner knew that the mud at the bottom of his pond would be the most fertile soil he'd ever seen, and Florida Governor William Jennings was heavily promoting the practice of draining Florida swampland to make useful farmland. The county had already dug many drainage ditches across the area, and this one ran right to Turner's new backyard. Turner cut channels from his pond to the ditch and created an elaborate maze of clay tiles to drain the pond water all the way to the bay, leaving a sunken garden bed behind. He quickly got to work planting exotic flowers and papaya trees. He built a log cabin at the edge of the garden so that he could sell his papayas to local neighbors. Over the next 15 years, the city of St. Petersburg experienced an unprecedented land boom. But that boom went bust, and Turner found himself in financial trouble as his plumbing career went down the drain. He noticed that shoppers at his fruit stand also liked to wander through his beautiful sunken garden, so he decided to charge them a nickel each to help make ends meet. Out of work, he went all in on his garden, making every effort to get rare and unusual plants for people to see, creating such a beautiful garden that the St. Petersburg Times said it will soon be nationally famous, ranking with any gardens in any place in this country. One of Florida's oldest roadside attractions was born. Oregon cactus. I found a lot of old pictures of this giant cactus plant and people posing next to it, but to be honest, I don't remember seeing it when we were there. I guess over the years, many of the exotic plants are gone. And really, I don't know anything about plants or gardening, so the importance of what we were walking past was lost on me. I did find this guide to the plants you could find in the gardens. Here's a couple highlights. The dragon tree's sap is red and called dragon's blood, and has been used as a dye as far back as Roman times. The Cuban royal palm isn't royal, it was named after a guy named Roy Stone, a Civil War soldier who started the department that would eventually build the US freeway system and also invented a steam-powered monorail. The lobster claw plant can only be pollinated by hummingbirds. And this famous Oregon cactus is usually pollinated by bats. I'm not sure if we saw any of these or not really, but we did have a great time. It's cool and shady and there's waterfalls and koi fish to feed, but this was our 3rd Viewmaster location for the day and we were running out of daylight, so we made our way back to the large building on the corner of the garden, which turned out to be rather interesting as well. But first, one more picture of flowers. Bougainvillea. Bougainvillea was named after a French Navy admiral and first documented in 1765 by Jeanne Baret, who disguised herself as a man in order to sail around the world with the Navy as the ship's botanist's assistant, and this mountain range on Pluto is named after her. Anyway, the building used as the entrance to the gardens today has quite the history. In a way, I think it represents the accumulation of everything that brought the Sunken Gardens into existence. From the mid-19th century citrus farmers to the turn-of-the-century railroad and sudden growth of the city, what was needed next was an indoor, refrigerated supermarket. And this place was revolutionary, called the Sanitary Market. It was designed during the ludicrous growth years in St. Pete's. It had 38,000 square feet of space, 26 merchant stalls, 10 shops in the arcades, and its big trick, a chiller plant and refrigeration system provided by a top-of-the-line absorption ice machine. This was built by the world's leading manufacturer of high-pressure cooling systems, the Columbus Iron Works, who'd made cannons during the Civil War. The newspapers of the time really reflected people's optimism. A beautiful market to buy locally grown produce, meats, and dairy, as well as get lunch, a malt, and fill your car with gas. Called sanitary because they put screens on the windows and kept the stock cold. It was, however, a total failure, closing within 3 years. It just couldn't withstand the economic bubble bursting. Keep in mind the land boom busting was so severe that Florida entered the Great Depression 3 years ahead of the rest of the nation. The building was sold to the American Legion, who used it for a few years to host boxing matches, and then sold to the Coca-Cola Company, who used it as a bottling plant, until the Turner brothers bought it in 1967 and incorporated it into their gardens. Today, I assume it's owned by the city. It's still the entrance to the gardens, but the bulk of the market is now a children's museum, and the old shopping arcade is now an Italian restaurant. We picked up a couple souvenirs from the garden gift shop and walked around the old Sanitary Market building to get dinner at Carrabba's. At the time, I honestly had no idea the history of the building we were eating in, but that's the fun of these Viewmaster travels, all the crazy facts you learn following in the footsteps of history. Well, that's it for this episode, and as always, thanks for watching.